No pressure. Hi, Candice.
Hello,
Um,
hello.
so you guys, I'm recording today a conversation that I wanted to have with my friend Candice, who's an astrologer from the UK. And she's also kind of a sort of a recovered type A corporate, right? Corporate type. Like she was really like in a high-powered corporate position for a long time. I can let her introduce herself, but she's worked in corporations in the UK and Dubai. And when I first met Candice, she was in her Pluto Square transit, and her relationship with the corporate world was starting to break down. And so she has since gone through quite a massive transformation, and she has become an astrologer, and she is trying very hard to penetrate the collective in a new way, to bring a new philosophy or a new ethos into the corporate structure. And she has a 10th house sun in Taurus with Chiron conjunct. And so she feels very strong and very, very personally responsible in a way for kind of going into the structure that is the bedrock of our society at the moment, of our global society, and
Yeah.
make sense. And she's trying to bring a more feminine energy, or a more collective energy, or a more spiritual energy
Mhm.
into these kind of hollowed halls of patriarchal domination and control, right? Where
Mhm.
profits and the hierarchy rules, and everything is done in a specific way and with a specific tonality,
Mhm.
mostly by men. So I found, a conversation I had with her the other week so interesting that I thought it might be interesting to you guys as well as my community. And so I wanted to just sit down with her and like pick her brain about what she's thinking about and how she's seeing this. And because she's kind of on the inside, right, of something, and she's working from within to make change, not only in herself, because she's kind of been in the patriarchy, like she's kind of been in the corporate, right? So she's having
Mhm.
fundamentally rewire the way she operates as a woman. Um,
Mhm.
and she has to come into business in this new way and sort of try to 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 impact that field as well. And so there was some really interesting conversations that were budding.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we both noticed, what we've all noticed and we all know is right on the horizon, is this shift of the nodes from a Scorpio south and a Taurus north to a Libra south and an Aries north. And this is really going to lead up to a very big change in the zeitgeist in
Mhm.
2025, when Neptune moves into Aries for 13 years. So Neptune has been in Pisces since 2012, and we've really seen a massive change on a collective level around spirituality and spiritual ideas. If you can remember back to 2012, was anybody talking about astrology or oneness or spirituality or ayahuasca, or like going into that, go like what we're all one? And like, I mean, maybe not since the Beatles days back in the 60s, right? Like there's just been this fundamental
Mhm.
unification field energy, like the whole kind of astral emotional field, the Neptunian field, the emotional dream field. We are now able to dream a dream of spirituality, and also, dreaming many different dreams as well. Like we are like have to recognize that we're talking to a very specific subset of society. Like, so our
Mhm.
is more of a spiritual, psycho spiritual language because we're astrologers. Of course, that's not going to have penetrated through the entire collective. However, there is a way that unity has become our norm since 2012. I mean, just look at all of us and our little devices. Like, are we not all one now? I kind of feel like we're one, right? Like, and then now it's
Yeah.
able to be one. I know, and I know many people will look at technology and be like, this is Uranian and this is blah 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 blah. But I mean, think about it. Like, we're one. It's
Yeah, and we're caught in the glamour of it, aren't we? That's so Neptunian, the glamour of all of this. And look at, like, how the filters and like everything, I can be whatever I project to the world that I want to be, through my little tiny device in my hand. Like, you're like, is it even real? It doesn't matter because it's real on my phone.
so really kind of determines our dream, right? And so
Mm.
we're all about to tip into an Aries dream maybe this nodal shift is going to bring forward some of the, like, maybe it's kind of like almost like a homeopathic remedy. Like it's opening up the field, right? It's gonna inspire us to find something in ourselves that we're going to need to carry us forward in the next couple of decades, right?
Yeah, something worth fighting for, I guess.
Something worth fighting. It over to you, Candice. Like, tell us a little bit about where you're from and like what your experience in the corporate world and interested in this stuff.
Oh, thank you, my darling. So yeah, I welcome any opportunity to talk with you. You are absolutely my astrology mentor, and I think, you know, it's the reason I guess it's of any interest, I hope, to anybody is, but my particular journey is actually going to be, in my world, there'll be a lot of women in particular that will resonate with this. And it's a story of falling, I guess, falling into a norm and being part of a structure, and just, this is it, and this is what success looks like. And I think so for myself, grew up in London, lovely working class family. There's definitely a spiritual incarnation within my family anyway. My first babysitter was a Swami monk. He taught me how to meditate at 6 years old. I had a lovely immersion early on. And I do feel like a lot of this is a journey coming back to that. So I understood spiritual principles. I understood reincarnation before I understood long division. You know, like, so there was always those seeds that were being sown there. So when the evolutionary astrology language sort of came along and being introduced to that, as you say, I was very much in my corporate self. I was working out in the Middle East, which by its, you know, its nature is very, it's matriarchal from a social perspective, but certainly patriarchal from a sort of, I guess, a corporate and governmental point of view. And it is where I thought I had found my, you know, I'd reached that 10th house. I was absolutely earning great money, and I had I was one of the youngest sort of female senior managers. And there was no tower moment. It just stopped working, and it just stopped being something that I could, it just didn't work in every, like that, anyone that's experienced that Pluto Square, it just somehow, it's just jarring. You can't work in that way anymore. And then it just so happened towards the end of that, the pandemic hit. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, let's stop for one second right there. Like, okay. Just what you're talking about, because the Pluto Square Pluto transit is a transit kind of in the 30s, like maybe in the mid to late 30s, right?
Exactly.
And on the evolutionary astrology, in that paradigm of thinking, and there are many, many ways of thinking about the chart, but that's one of them. In that way of thinking, Pluto actually represents the deepest soul complex that you're here karmically to unfold or to transmute or to transform. So when you get the Pluto Square, it's like coming face to face with the reason why you've incarnated. And you get a real point in your life where you're like, oh my God, okay, like I can't keep playing the old story. I have to find a new tune. And this is the moment. This is like a critical moment, like a real change point. So that's what she's describing. I just wanted to interject.
Yeah, no, perfect. Absolutely. And I, you know, a South Node Capricorn as well, Pluto transiting that South Node was, and I, you know, the fixedness in me, I'm very fixed. It was that this wasn't a surrender moment by any means. This was, no, I'm going to dig in. I'm going to keep digging my heels in. It took a redundancy, a car accident, just being dumped out of the blue to really get this message about, what are you doing? This is, you know, this isn't working for you. It's not making you happy. We then had the COVID pandemic where I was just forced to sit down and stop. And that was the change for everything. And then somebody messaged me out of the blue, and I'd at that point taken a year off, and I'd done a bunch of random stuff, and one of those was to get a diploma with one of the British astrology schools. And she said, listen, I really need some help, you know, I'm struggling. And I said, I don't know, but I could do your birth chart reading. And then that was it. And it was like, it just attracted so much love into my life. It attracted so many, and it's not to say, you know, I've experienced love. I certainly have never had a problem with, like, you know, abundance or those things, but it was just a different kind of purpose. And I think the astrology was just, it was literally that lightning rod to pull that in and to sort of say, this is what it means, because you didn't have a tangible taste of what it meant to be in purpose and to be out of corporate and out of a power suit and telling people off in a pair of heels and strutting past. Like, you didn't have an understanding of that. And that's what it brought me. And that's why I will be forever grateful for yourself, and then for every single person in the last 3 years that's kind of come along and engaged in conversation. And it's you know, and then sort of taking us up till now, it's the kind of lofty ambition, the lofty sort of feeling is like, there's got to be a different way. And I don't just mean for women in the workplace, but just there's got to be a different way of getting things done. We are not doing the right thing for the planet. We're not doing the right thing for ourselves. Nobody's winning. So there must be a different way to try and tackle this. And obviously, you know, Pluto through Capricorn's been doing his thing. And then I'm like, well, what's the rebuild? What out of the ashes, what kind of emerges from this?
Well, we're right at that pivotal point, right? We're about to have Pluto come back into Capricorn.
Yeah.
And and this is the end. Like, this is literally the death throes of the, you know, the last 15 years since 2008. Like, it's the death of that Pluto through Capricorn. And yes. In 24, we're just off to Pluto and Aquarius so the new way is starting. Yeah. We're still in that like the dissolution. This is like the denouement, like the final finale.
Yeah.
This corporate thing. I just want to share with you as well. Like, I was also in the corporate. I also did corporate, right? After I had my awakening when I was 20, I don't even know if you know this, but when I had my awakening experience when I was 20, I left society, like literally left it. So just just walked like a wandering Jew, and I'm a Jew, so I can say that, like literally like just wandered around in like state of consciousness where I was just like praying all the time, and I was just like, whoa. And that's when I learned astrology. And then when I'm sitting on a beach in Hawaii, and I was living just like a hippie in Hawaii. And I remember the moment I was sitting on this beach with all of my little friends, and my guides came in and they're like, "You're not one of them." And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" And I looked around and I'm like, "Oh my God, you're right. I'm not one of them. What do I do?" And they're like, "It's time to go back. You have to go back in. If you ever want to make, you have to go inside." And I'm like, oh, yes. And within 7 days, I'd manifested the money and a flight to get in London home. And when I got home, though, I realized I had to make money. It was like 98. I was like, what am I going to do? So I started working. And then I decided, I was like, I'm really good at business and people like me. I think I should do commerce. And I went into business school and graduated at the top of my class and got recruited by a big tier 1 corporation. And that's where I work, you know, I put on my sexy suit, just like you. I didn't get to work in Dubai. That would have been pretty cool. I only got to work in Toronto.
Yeah, it's, and I think even that is just, you know, being abroad, and I've always worked for airlines. So just this idea of like, you know, the world is not enough. Like it's always been a global outlook. I've always like that idea. And I think the other thing as well, like sometimes there can be a feeling of like, oh, it's only the outsiders that find the woo-woo. And that can be, I know that can be really, really true. And I know this from a lot of my clients as well, but that was never me. I enjoyed being on the inside. You know, I enjoyed being kind of in the midst of things, and never always felt like very much part of that. So it was never sort of a reclamation of, you know, like I've always felt, you know, I was on the outer edges of society. I was within that, very much housed within it, enjoying being part of, you know.
Yeah, you were like drenched in it. So the moment of change is really interesting, right? Because there's a lightning rod moment where you know you can't continue to contribute to this diseased structure.
Yeah.
And then, but you didn't want to let go because you really liked it. So what was it that you liked about it? Like, what felt like home in that to you?
Yeah, I think that's the distinction there. I think it wasn't that I loved it. I think it was just and again, this is the beauty of Pluto. My ego loved it because it had found what it felt was, you know, that the upper echelon, the epoch of what it had come here to do. So to not have that, I wasn't really enjoying it at all. I was sick quite regularly. I definitely was falling out with a lot of people, you know, that because I decided to imbibe this kind of activist, and I was going to take on, if there was injustice, I was going to take it on within the corporation. And it's sort of, this very frustrated sort of, pseudo like female, boss thing kind of came in, and it was not serving me.
So
There was just that.
It's like, I'm a powerful beach. I'm a powerful woman. And you were like riding this. Well, you've got a lot of Scorpio. I mean, she's a Scorpio moon, Taurus sun, Leo rising.
Yeah.
She's powerful.
It's a lot. And that's the thing. I mean, my God, the big multi-million-dollar contracts I would push through sheer will, and that it's all, and it doesn't it doesn't serve. And ultimately, I'm thinking, who am I serving? And I think that's what it comes down to. But for me, the big point really came down. It's when it was the people, and I think that will always be my motivation, which is the people. Just no one looked that happy anymore, in a way that even pre maybe 2008, I'd felt like people were getting on board with this. You could see that plutonic effect starting to, people were looking at each other going, is this really like,
it's interesting for 2008, because that's when Pluto changed to Capricorn.
Yeah,
actually that was when I got a dream telling me to get out. Capricorn, and I had a full dream that showed me, it was like being in a court of law, and the court of post-apocalyptic law tribunal. It was kind of, if what's the name of the court where they try you for like real egregious war crimes? What's that called?
Oh, The Hague.
Yeah, it was like being in The Hague. And there's a tribunal of people judging you according to your pre-apocalyptic behavior. And so all of these people coming up and saying, did you know what you were doing to contribute to climate change? What was your responsibility? Do you know what, like, and I had this, and I was watching my colleagues get up on the stand and get questioned, and they didn't know how to answer. When I realized that they weren't responsible because they didn't know what they were doing, but it struck me in the dream, oh, but I do. So I have to leave because I have to be responsible. So it's when I quit my job.
Yeah. And so it's that shift in consciousness. And I'm never going to blame someone for the level of consciousness that they're at. I do think when you hit a level of consciousness, which I think was really certainly that last 6 months of that Pluto Square, you've reached a consciousness level now where you are aware, and to be aware, but to not not feel like you were making the change.
But tell me, what did you become aware of that was wrong with the corporate culture? Like, so let's go to what's the problem. Like, why? Like, for me, I just saw that it was like really, really, really not sustainable. Like, it just seemed like I was working at a consumer packaged goods company, the biggest one on the planet, right? We were responsible for more landfill waste on the planet than any other corporation on the planet. So for me, it was a very much an environmental thing. Like, it was really like creating waste. And I think that's bad. And it was that like mindset of like, we must make more. We must make more.
Yes.
Every single quarter, there must be more. And it was just, how can you keep making more garbage? Like, why don't you think how to reduce the waste and how to become sustainable? But I realized that it's antithetical, because in the mindset of more, you cannot work sustainability into it, because it would reduce the more. There's no. So
and you're exactly right. It's that fundamental, like, look at something like GDP. So ingress of Saturn into Pluto was the global financial crisis, and we were rallying. So it's always great to get human beings behind a crisis. We love a crisis. We'll rally for a crisis. We get it together. We get very, so all of a sudden it's that kind of, especially us Brits, it's like, yes, post-war, we must all get together and rally and rebuild. So that had that energy to it, but it felt empty. And I think the fundamental thing, and it's the capitalism. You take something like GDP, which is a measure of increased growth on a planet with finite resources, and it is just basic maths that will not work at some point. We're going to run out. And because obviously everything that comes off that is, I don't believe corporations are inherently evil. I don't think any structure is inherently evil. It's just when we are driving for profit and nobody's questioning it, because we all want to do a good job. And that's the nature of the patriarchy, which is like, I'm getting a tap from above, and daddy's patting me on the shoulder and I've done well and he's getting a tap. No one's questioning what's my overarching input and therefore impact as part of this. That was the thing that
good enough to make it to the next rung on the ladder, I know I'm okay, because all I'm focused on is that next right above me. And is he giving me a cookie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Dog, here's your treat.
Yeah, and it's that banality, isn't it? It's just that it's no one's out there sort of stroking a cat and twitching their moustache. It's just
someone up there is in charge and that they know what they're doing. You're like, someone's got to know what they're doing. Like, they're paying me. I got a corporate car. I mean, I know I got some benefits, and my kids can eat, right? Like, so I'm innocent. I'm just doing what they told me.
Yeah.
It's
like, and you sit in those boardrooms, and I think that's when you realize, my God, nobody really knows. And I've had some of the most conversations about, and I'm thinking, is anyone, and again, it's that, is anyone going to turn around and say, I just don't know? And we do a lot of the work I do is around like vulnerability in leadership, and that idea of going, God, I just haven't got a clue. And I would have loved a moment of, I'm in charge of this, multi-billion-pound corporation. I haven't got a clue, because that fundamentally is what it's coming down to. And that's, I promise you, that's reality.
Mind shift. So because if there's a hierarchical structure that's falling apart,
mm-hmm.
and then there's a total mind shift to I don't know, rather than he knows, they know up there. What if no one knows? Then what happens to the structure at that point?
Well, I think what happens is what I viewed. It ossifies and starts to very, very quickly get brittle. And then I think this is where we're going to see like this last, this is what's going to happen.
This is where we're at right now. Because like, we're all like, nobody knows, like everything's a shit show. So no one knows. Like, we're just realizing that all of the bureaucracies are kind of breaking down, and that everybody's ignorant, and maybe that's a safe place to be. Maybe that's actually where we're supposed to be, is this feeling of not knowing, that we're like, but we still have to do something. So it's very vulnerable. So, okay. So we're identifying a few things here. So we're identifying the fact that there's this rabid hunger, or this top-down hierarchical structure that creates almost like an ignorant, it's almost like an ignorant compliance, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you're at fault for being a part of the machine. Like, we all have to, like, it's all just, everyone has to come home at night and feed their children. Like, there's no one's to blame. And that's also like, I recently heard, oh gosh, who was it? I think it was like Charles Eisenstein. He's such a brilliant philosopher. And he was talking about this. I think it was him. I'm so sorry if it wasn't. I'm a double Gemini. What do I know? But he was talking about how, like, there is this way that we attack, right? Like, that activism is about attacking and making wrong, but that the way forward is about saying, no, wait a second. Like, we've all been part of a messed up system. Nobody's to blame for this. Like, this is like a 2,500 year cycle. Like, let's just accept the fact that we don't know what we're doing, like you said, and create a new structure and come into reality. And so this is where you're sitting right now, isn't it? Because you're straddling the old and the new. And so I'm so curious with how you're feeling with that. Like, where are you at in that conversion space?
And I love what you just said, and it's one of several very good philosophers that are coming up. And where I'm at is fully understanding that and feeling that very deeply. On a personal level, I have learned the hard way. I cannot come at this, and this is where it is forcing me to just let go of the masculine, even if I didn't want to, because I cannot come at these patriarchal systems with my own inner patriarchy showing, like my patriarchy showing. And because what I'm doing is confronting and just bringing, so this idea of like, fighting for peace, or the idea of like, it's the climate wars. We are not going to change things with the same energy we're bringing to it. It requires either the polar opposite or just something, and this feminine energy, whatever that means, but coming at that to the softening, because I believe it's only in the softening that we're allowed to go. And then there's no Nuremberg trials. There's no who's to blame and who pumped the most carbon, because that's just going to drive more fear. And then the behaviors get worse, etc., etc. There has to be such a deep, deep level of forgiveness. Like, have I got that within me? I don't know. But on a collective level, to say, we're going to have to move forward, accept that some things have been done that cannot be undone. But the only way we're going to move forward with this is to allow what has happened to have happened. We're not saying it's right, but we have to remove the spirit of this, like, and that's one of my, I guess, my challenges in coming to, understanding the feminine that's sort of coming forward. And there's a lot of rage. There is a lot of rage, and I understand it. But we have to look at how we can shape and hold that rage, because I'm scared it's just going to become another fireball we're throwing at the more I'm thinking like this, like, it's the Lord of the Rings tower that's just there, like, ready to burn.
So here's a thought. So we've got the nodal shift coming, right? The nodal shift is going to bring us into Aries, which I'm hearing like the warrior, right? The rage, like the injustice, the violence. There's almost a part of us that does have to stand up and say, I'm not going to be compliant. I'm not just polite. I'm not going to put my head under the pillow. I'm not going to bury myself in the sand, right? Like, to move away from the Libra complacency and the polite conversation and the repartee and the harmony and the balance. And I'm just, this is, and the subverted anger of Libra, right? Which tries to not confront it. And to move into the powerful saying, no, 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 no. But then very quickly following that, because you're right, like that can become a flame that is, look at what's happening to fire on the planet. Look at what's happening to the fires on our planet. Like in my country, we've got one end on the East Coast is all firing, and on the West Coast is all fire. Like it's like all burning, right? So the fire can get out of control and it can create so much destruction. So then we have Neptune moving into Aries. Right? Neptune being that kind of, what is Neptune, right? You were like, like we were chatting, we were like, what is Neptune? And
I struggle with him.
Spiritualize the warrior. Like, how is she bring an energy of kind of like a unified, almost like it's really difficult to get a handle on Neptune, but when I'm thinking about Neptune in terms of Neptune being in Pisces since 2012, back to 2012, and I think about myself back in 2012, and I think about the fact that, I had this real spiritual awareness, as did you, right? And it was always awake in me since the age of 21, but I didn't talk to anybody about it because I had this understanding, I just knew that it wasn't safe. In fact, every time I did try to talk about it, I would get my hands, someone would look at me like I was crazy. And I told one of my family members some of my spiritual experiences, and I remember like the look on her face was so scary. It was like absolute rejection and fear. She was afraid.
Yeah, that's common.
But think back, like, look at it now. Look where we are now. I'm not afraid. I'm really proud of who I am. And I work very, 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 very hard to discipline myself so that I can stay alive. And it's every single day it's work, right? Same with you. Yeah. It's serious. And it's probably the most serious thing and the most important thing. And this has happened because Neptune's been in Pisces. And so the entire collective dream field, because Neptune rules the dream that we're dreaming, dream that includes spirituality. It includes, right, unified fields. Look at science, look at physics, basically proven that reality is not even real.
Yes.
Thought that everything we are is just an idea. And it's just like, oh my God, like it's like Hermeticism come to life, right? Like things are fractal and nothing's real. And there's just like, so this wouldn't even be possible if we hadn't had Neptune sweeping the archetype of Pisces and just this unified field consciousness that's now possible. So think about what Neptune will do to Aries. archetype is possible, how can we fight for something more than just being right, or fight for something more than just blaming, shaming, and hurting, quote unquote, opponent? Like, what if we fight for, I don't know, what do we fight for?
If there's something, I always think like it's, well, we said it's sacred anger. There's something about sacred, it's not sacred anger, but it's like sacred justice. There's a, you know, the I guess the ultimate archetype of the warrior in Aries is actually, it's not the war, it's the willing to sacrifice. It's the willing to, I love so much that my earthly body is not worth as much as the love that I have for the collective. Like that's, I always love that idea of the warrior.
I love that. So, and that reminds me of the fact that Pisces is the entry, right? Aries is from the Piscean field of oneness. When Aries remembers its oneness, right? Neptune opens the field of Pisces to remind the individuated self.
Yes.
It's still one, but it is one presentation of the whole.
Yes.
There is automatically this sense of responsibility to the whole through the self. So each one of us becomes a point of light, right? In the mind of God, as Alice Bailey would say, the point of light in the mind of God. So it's, so maybe, and then we know that because we are dreaming that dream now, the unified field dream, we can express ourselves and be brave and be strong and fight for what we know is true, which is love. Just that we're all one. We're all one.
We're all one.
Why would we ever want?
Also, and we're individuals. So it's like, as you said, it's like we've had that kind of, you know, just I would imagine if someone was to look at like the Google returns, if someone had like, you know, manifestation and, you know, quantum field back in 2012 versus now, like that must have just gone up hundreds of thousands of percent. Like we are in a world where like the Joe Dispenzas and people kind of, you know, taking all this stuff and making it accessible. And I suppose almost Neptune in Pisces is that kind of global surrender, isn't it? It's just so, and then we come back, and then Aries is like the individual nodes lighting up with it. I always look at it like this quantum field, like just the individual nodes lighting up, and they're the big connected field. But here we are as our nodes, the inner divinity.
They're lit up. So they're light. I love it. I love it. Yay. So cool. That's amazing. So it's interesting then, the now that you're in, because you're like, as we retrograde back into Capricorn, you have to, and then move ahead into Pluto and Aquarius. Like, how are you choosing to insert yourself into life now? Like, because the last time we talked, you were like coming up with schemes and plans and ideas to go back into the boardroom and make change inside the structure. And is that how you're feeling still, or where are you at with that?
I don't, the absolute honest part is I don't know, but then I realize that part of this little feminine journey is going back into the intuition. So actually allowing for, you know, to kind of go back into those hallowed halls and, you know, walk through those realms. And I'm immediately back there. I'm immediately back part of that, slightly assimilated. And I can feel myself, I can feel the oppositional in me going, oh, I don't like this. So that doesn't work. So it's okay. So what will work? What are the conversations that need to be had? Who are the people you're supposed to be meeting? And I'm really trying to feel my way through this, and just really, there's a lot when you start talking to people, when you start having conversations. So a good example is one of the big 4 consulting firms of the world. We've been doing through a friend a bit of work with them, and I'll be honest, that the big pushback for the spiritual ideas, and I wouldn't even class them as, you and I probably wouldn't even see them as spiritual, things like emotional intelligence and intuition, the women have pushed back the hardest. They have really struggled to the point of anger.
Tell me more.
So, and I'm getting direct feedback from my colleague that's working, and it's been everything from kind of personal, who are you, how are you qualified, how dare you come in and teach this stuff, all the way through to who am I if these rules aren't in place, like, and a genuine, like, from there I see more of the men tend more towards an apathy, to a kind of, I guess it works, but what else would there be? Women, it's almost like they're holding on to those last bastions of this. If I don't have this, what am I? and like that ossified structure we talked about, that's they're clinging on. And the minute you know when you try and pull into some of the feminine, and I always believe this is the point before a breakthrough, there is a real pushback. There's a real sense of, no, these, you know, these people are lazy, the disdain that they can have. And I think, my God, like, how did you get to this place? Because you were a girl like me and like you at one point. You know, what happened? And that's been one of the biggest surprises as well.
Maybe the women sort of rose up through feminism into this structure. It really kind of like we owe everything to it.
Yeah, it was our you know, it was the kind of the gilded cell that we've afforded ourselves. Well, look at it now. We get to operate in this, and it's not for me to say what individuals view of.
We're so we're so
yeah, and but it's, you know, but that's also in line with, you know, these women will tell you they've maybe not had a period for a year. They've not had, like, it's so obviously like just hitting them in their feminine in the most physical sense as well. Like, it's, you know, it's not me going, oh, I think this might not be working for you. It is physically not working for them. That's become very clear as well.
Very, very, very scary to think of letting go of the money, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really is. And it comes down to survival for so many people.
Yes.
Because it's a terrifying thing as a woman to have scrabbled up the ladder, first of all, and had to fight your way to the top. But then to be faced with the potential of letting go of control means you might lose it all. Like, after you feel already like you're sort of warbling, right? But you actually like the power because you have earned it. Why would you let go of that power now that you have it? You have, right? Like, it's very complicated. Like, men don't know what it's like not to have it.
No.
So there's this, maybe the apathy comes from like, oh, well, this isn't even a threat to me because it's just stupid. But
it's not on the live. Yeah, it doesn't hit you on the in that guttural sense. Like, it's not a root chakra hit in the way it would be for a woman, which is like, if I don't have this, like, maybe that's something, I don't know, ancestral or whatever, where it's, if we don't have this, like, my God, what are we going to be taken back to? Men can be a bit more.
Women also remember being burned at the stake by the millions. Correct. So there's a very visceral, for perhaps like epistemic, or what's it called? When they've now proven that we hold all the memories of our
the epigenetical, epigenetics, literally
about not being safe to be in our feminine power.
Yes.
What is feminine power, Candice? Like, describe. I mean, you've pointed to it a little bit, but what is the feminine power?
Well, I think so. The only and kind of this relates to your previous question, having been kind of worked both sides, shall we say, which is to be in a place, not necessarily had, you know, I had my Pluto Square, but so does everybody. But it was to go from that place of being so in it to not being wanted to be part of it, and to be able to sort of, I wouldn't say fully come out the other side, but if I take something as working, you know, you're in a boardroom and you're doing these things for these, you know, let's face it, 90% of the time it's highfalutin men, and you're running around and having these conversations, and there's a flight here, and then sitting in, you know, in my t-shirt doing an astrology reading. If you ask me like where I'm more in my power, it's absolutely working with people doing that. So what I'm trying to work on is the articulation of that, because one is more feminine, one is more, and I don't even know if the right word is feminine, but one is connection, the other one is armor, and it's, I can get through this. And I don't get me wrong, there is a, you know, that idea of grit and steel and like the kind of Mars thing, which is, I'm going to keep pushing. There is a attainment to that. There is, you know, I'm not disregarding that, but my God, it feels so nice not to have to put the armor on. And it feels like you've shed several layers that aren't so heavy. I literally have had a neck pain for the last 3 years that they cannot get to the bottom of, and I know it's to do with this. And as that shedding, as you're carrying less of that, the connections open, because you're not having to work through those layers of armor and kind of negotiate the chinks. You're just there immediately. And I really want to say to women, it doesn't be astrology, but there is a different sense of power. This is not power, what we think it is. We're just clinging on because we're scared, and that's okay. The shift over to the other side is where the power is. I haven't got to the end of what that looks like, but it is to do with connection, and you meet the most incredible people, all of that. It just, you can't even compare the two, but I can understand why we cling on. I can.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand it too. And I know there are lots of women like you who are out there changing the game, because I've met so many of them now,
Yeah.
as clients particularly,
Yeah.
but very, very high positions of power, who are bringing a real sense of spirit, I suppose,
Mm.
into the professional realm. But they keep it.
They do.
And that's okay. I mean, we decided to separate church and state for a reason.
Mm.
Really can't bring in, well, it's very difficult to bring in belief, right? So it, like, let's be honest, like, until the whole culture believes, it's very difficult to use language to bring in that. So you have to couch the language in something that maybe the collective is more comfortable with. So
Yeah.
is a wonderful word, right? Like connection, intuition or sensitivity, receptivity might be another word.
Yes.
Receptive rather than armored, right? Or active, right? So you could use words that invite the feminine or invite a different way of being without making it spiritual, because we are like a really small minority.
Yeah. And
they just don't have the language. The language creates a no, there's still an aversion to it.
Yeah. And there's I think there's a really excellent book, and the name, I think it's so cheesy, and I don't know if you've come across it, but it's basically, it's masculine in the way he's written it. Like the front cover is really cheesy. It's a man and a woman running after some money, and it's like really kind of 90s looking. But this guy's literally, it's called I forget the name of it, but basically he talks about changing the game, and he is so cleverly used absolute corporate business world work and just talk to this idea of, like, the quantum field. He's obviously called it something else, which is, with the sort of businessy twang to it. But people like this have slowly started making inroads, but they've had to talk that language, which I get. I think, and that he's male, and he has his clients, and it works really well. I think for the female leaders, and I do believe this is our time, I think female like eldership is going to start coming into its own, like just this idea of like understanding that, after menopause, women aren't written off. Like there's so much goodness there that we have to uplift them. But also female leaders, it's because we're space holders, right? We're literally like, we're like womb space holders. And I'm not going to tell you what to think, but I'm going to try and create some kind of container of compassion, of strength, where you can come to these ideas, use whatever language you like, but eventually come to these ideas yourself, realize what's not serving, realize what's not working, and without blame and without shame, starting to work on holding that. But maybe some of the Aries, piece needs to, we're going to call stuff out, we're going to do it unashamedly, and we're going to be very assertive in that. But the feminine is like, needs to create that space, because when these structures fall down, something's going to have to come and hold it, but in a very different way, I think.
Wow, I hope you're right. I know you're right, but from my little human part, I hope you're right. Yeah.
I would love to sort of, a couple of friends have said to me, like, do you not like want to just run off to, Bali now and just like sit there? And I think, no, like, why do I want to go back to the trenches? I don't understand. Like, why would I want to go back? But that's the calling. That's where I feel like I want to be. It's not a life of spiritual retreat. It's being able to bring that in, being able to be a channel, or whatever you want to call it, to bring that into the places where it's needed the most. Because you're right, we are a minority, and we can sit there and just be like, this idea of like the world's probably gonna be this and that, and there'll be this there's going to be people in kind of the new timelines and people in the old timelines, and then I don't know, there feels like there is a bridging, there's a bridging required also, and maybe some of us are here to facilitate some of that. I don't know.
I think so. I think they're because all the wandering people who don't know which side to take, or what they true, and they're looking for answers. I think you can impact so many people just by standing in your own power, standing in your own energy. And you're a 10th house sun. So Right? Like, what are you going to do? Your perspective, I mean, your perspective on life is, how can I influence society? What's my
Yeah,
role here? How do I build something? I want to be in this. This is my job, right?
yeah,
It's your job. What are you going to do
yeah.
about
And
it?
it's the same thing that called me to corporate. So I can't. That 10th house sun showed itself in that way, but it's also showing itself, let's say, in a more elevated consciousness way. Like, and there will be further elevations, I'm sure of that. But it's, you know, it's funny how it finds its home. This is why astrology works, because it finds its home somewhere, and it's just, this is the new evolution, hopefully, of that.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. Yeah, I get it. Oh, so you're called in to doing work with corporate leadership and to try and change the paradigm of thinking. And so the work that you're doing is kind of trying to help them think in a different way or in a different paradigmatic structure. So
Mm-hmm.
to open their minds and trying to shift them away from linear analytical, hierarchical thinking into something a little bit more intuitive and a little bit more spatial and a little bit more welcoming and a little bit more also, like you said earlier, no mind, right? A little bit more, I
Yeah,
don't know, and that's okay. In the I don't know, we'll find something much more interesting than in the I know, because in the I know, you've got the history. You've got like a whole line of I know that has built up to this I know. And I think sometimes that's why like academics get so stodgy, right? I could like sometimes
yes.
academics are their own worst enemy because
Mm,
push forward in academia, it's almost like you have to just be impervious to like criticism and attack. It's like no one really wants to be the next person who says, oh, I know this and it's different than all
yeah.
that. But yet at the same time, that's what its function is. It's the weirdest weird.
Yeah. And I think they've, yeah, and I think, you know, we can do about corporates, but from what I understand with colleagues that work in, you know, higher education, my God, talk about systems that need overhauling. Like, that's actually beyond, in terms of just its inability to hold anything different.
Yes, exactly. Because they
Like,
know they're all
the idea of not knowing, which again is, you know, this, we've got to embrace this idea of like, I, you know, the fear of I don't know, you know, which is pushing us towards this like very secular, very scientific view. We must have everything, it must be quantified, we must understand. And, you know,
and it's also like there's also like an element of I don't want to stand out, right? Like there's also an element I just have to toe the line, which is always a real danger. And I feel like something in me worries about the Pluto and Aquarius decades
yes,
because I'm
yes.
kind of scared that, you know, if we don't learn how to take our own impulses from our higher self
Mm.
and trust our own individuated connection to the universe, then we're very likely just to go along, toe the line, be
Mm.
the in the herd, like it's right, which is dangerous in a Pluto and Aquarius cycle.
And wasn't that the last cycle was in, it was the, with sort of the height of Russian, it's like the Russian communists, this idea of like, you know, sort of shadow fraternity, which is, we are one, there is no individuation, like the collective is all that there is. And I think there's definitely something around that. It would be interesting to see with Neptune in Aries if that, the sacred individuation, this could be like a, you know, a counterpoint to that. But I agree with you, this idea of being able to, we've seen hyper individualism, and I think there's a lot of capitalism, you know, has a lot to answer for when it comes to that. But I think on the Pluto lesson, it's like, what am I holding sacred? What am I coming back to? What do I stand for? What are my beliefs and, you know, authenticity, and
Mm-hmm.
not, you know, just the Borg, you know, the assimilation of one mind, like the hive mind.
Exactly. That like really working the paradox between being an individual within
Mm,
or being a part of the collective and allowing the collective to define us as an individual, like that
yeah,
complicated relationship because it's
yeah, yeah. And I think there's you know, the more you read about, so for example, there's an idea of I belong to a sort of community called Teal organizations, and it's the variation of colors. And if you take orange to be the most hierarchical, which would be like the military, sorry, I think red, and then orange becomes more like the corporate structures we know, and then it sort of moves down into green would be, there's a series of probably smaller businesses that operate that way. Teal organizations have no leadership. They are pure egalitarianism, and we center around a project and we figure it out between ourselves. And the consciousness that would be required on a corporate level, though, is we're not there yet. I kind of always apply it as well a bit strangely to, people talk about open relationships. It's like there's nothing inherently wrong with an open relationship. Like the consciousness level you would have to be at to have that level of trust and openness. These Teal organizations, and there's a few of them in like Belgium and places that are really kind of leading the way, but it's such a delicate balance with human egos involved. You get to a certain number and it's like, so what replaces hierarchy? What replaces that sort of top-down structure? That's going to be interesting.
Well, you called it the sacredness of the individual, right? If the individual can find their sacredness, then there's an inner sense of being connected to something that's bigger than the self. So there's a faith in that, or there's a trust in that. And maybe as Pluto migrates its way through Aquarius, testing our individuation within the collective, and Neptune itself through Aries, we will be able to find a sense of myself as a sacred spark within the whole, right? Within the collective, to take my unique place inside this whole thing that I am. And I don't believe that the collective needs to be equal. I don't think equality is at all what we're talking here, right? Like there are people who can be in charge. There are people who can be responsive to those in charge. Like that's nature. That's not, that doesn't mean that we're patriarchal or that we're in a hierarchy. That just means that some of us are more organized toward management and some of us are more strategic and like to make choices and decisions about where we should go. Like, and that's okay. And there will always be people who have more capacity as well than other people. Like I don't think that income equality is at all a reasonable or likely outcome as well. Like I feel like communism really didn't work. You know what I mean? Like it didn't work. Like it sucks and it wrecks people's a lot of friends from communist Russia, from communist Cuba. They were very happy being raised in those environments. They were miserable. It's not fair. You know what I mean? To the spirit of an individual to be limited, right? But nor is it fair to the spirit of an individual for an individual to act from greed or self-service. And I think, and that speaks to a whole other part of individuation, because when we individuate up, we move away from the lower chakras, which are self-serving kind of parts of our architecture, right? Yeah. I want, it's mine. I'm going to take it away because there's not enough. Right. So I'm creating a divisive me versus you kind of conflict with life, right? Where I need to fight for what's mine. And that's not sacred warriorship at all, right? Because if you are in your alignment, abundance just happens. There's enough for all of us, right? It's nature's law that when you are in alignment, your higher self, in true alignment, like really living from that place of faith, and in that alignment, and it's not just a platitude, but it's an actual thing. Yeah. Everything you need comes to you. And what I need will be different than what you need, because I'm different than you. And it's okay for me to be different than you. I don't want to be you. Why would I want to be you? Like, I like me, right? And there's that multiplicity that's allowed within a collective structure when people are lining into their own unique sacredness. Yeah. They're not, that's okay too. But hopefully enough of us will. Right? If enough of us do, there's that tipping point, right? There's that impact that, that the field can hopefully benefit from. And I believe we're all going there as a collective. So I trust that and do the work inside myself. As you were alluding to, some of us are maybe just a little bit ahead, understanding that more, and that's okay. That's just why we came to the planet.
Yeah. And I hope that, if we take something like this, this sacred rage, this anger that's coming up, let that be, that's the surfacing, and let that be the outcome. But otherwise it just becomes as you said, a forest fire that has no point to it. if it's actually like, with animals, like the reason we have rage is to assert our boundaries. But in a society where you've been, told that either your boundaries, or been raised in a way that boundaries don't matter, or you're the good girl and you must sit down, and nobody likes anyone that stands up for themselves, that rage can start to get a bit sort of perverted, and it's like, well, what do I do with this? But the whole point, we let it emerge. We're not fearful of the anger. We can hold that and go, yeah, it needs to emerge. We've got witch wounds, we've got centuries of this stuff that needs to come to the fore. But then from that, let that be your sacred individuation. So let the sparks fly, so you become the sparks that you spoke about. Yeah. And it's like, I'm not getting trapped. Yeah.
It's going out. I have a Pluto in Libra opposite Mars and Aries in my chart. And I remember when I was going through my Pluto square, well, guess what it was doing? It was squaring Mars as well. And I had to learn how to manage my rage, right? And I learned energetically what I would do, because at the start of Pluto square Mars and Aries, like I started to rage out, like that was my first impulse, was to rage out and to hurt whatever was there. And like the rage would like a dragon, some like fire just coming out of my mouth. Like, I don't know where this is coming from. Like the evil violence of everything is coming out of my mouth. And then I remember, like, I was like, oh, Sarah, you're a mother. You can't do this. And I had to like pull in the rage. But what I tried to do is rewire it so that it went up. I wanted it to go up. So I wanted the rage to have a place to be expressed, but I didn't want to hurt anybody, right? So almost like my rage could be expelled when I gave it up to God, or when I expressed it down, but it wasn't going to harm anybody because it was mine and I was responsible for it. And then what it does is it ignites the Kundalini, right? Because fire is life force wanting to express itself through the whole system, but it's not designed necessarily to hurt another person, unless in defense you're stopping a boundary, right? Like creating a boundary. I love that. Like boundaries are healthy things. So no is a healthy thing, but that was one of the ways I played with my rage when I was going through that, to try and make sure I babies and harming cat. It's like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really useful, because I think we're going to need to, there's a lot of rage, as I say, I'm seeing a lot of rage, and I want to be able to work with people to understand individually what that means and what that needs, because it needs to be seen. I had a dream this morning of a friend, and we were, long story short, because dreams are always really boring when you talk about them, but we were in a plane crash together, and we burnt up in the jet fuel, me and her. She works for one of the biggest, I won't name them, biggest consulting groups in the world, under a huge amount of pressure. And I actually messaged her this morning. She said, and this girl is Capricorn moon, Virgo sun, just everything's fine, stoic till the end. And she goes, I am so angry, and I've never heard, in 12 years of knowing her, I'd never heard these words, and the tears were coming through. And I said, I just had a dream where we were burnt up with jet fuel. Like, it was insane that came to, and
not bored. That's amazing. You're tuning into the sacred rage.
I am. I really am.
Speaking to you. So there's a reason. Like, then that's a call, right? That's a call.
I think so. Yeah. And it's okay. It's okay to feel it. I don't, because it's the blame and the, I'm not, as you said, you brought it upwards, and maybe that's different for everybody, but I love the idea of, like, it wasn't just sitting here burning up my sacral chakra or my solar plexus and giving me ulcers. It was coming through and up through the alchemy of the heart and being allowed to kind of express in that way.
Get it out. Yeah. There's a rage room in my city. A friend of mine just invited me to go and enjoy it with him yesterday. And I was like, a rage room. And apparently you room and you smash things.
Yep. They're popping up everywhere. I was reading an article in The Guardian the other day. They are super popular in London. So
I can't wait. Maybe that's the answer. Learning how to express the rage in a way that doesn't harm others, but that blasts us open so that we can individuate our sacred selves.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the reason why women are saying no.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid of what's going to get unleashed if they say yes.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of that. And I think that's why we're seeing the, you unlock this, and God, the feminine rage is a terrifying thing. I think, we're probably more scared of it. The first person to probably tell us off was a woman. And I remember listening to a guy who does a sort of men's podcast saying, like, men tend to have female teachers. It's, their mother tends to be the homemaker. Feminine rage is something to be feared and therefore heavily fucking suppressed. Do you know what I mean? Like, we need to keep that down, because you can reduce, and I've seen it happen. I've been able to do it myself, like reduce a grown man to a 6-year-old boy with a few tuts and a few, well, you're not going to do that, are you? It's amazing. They just kind of like shrink in.
I don't like doing that.
No, that was me again. Like in you're not making any change there. In my that was a very easy thing to do, like that kind of to revert to this kind of sassy, I'm going to pull you down. It doesn't work. It's that's old paradigm.
And I feel like that's a beautiful place for us to stop the conversation, is just to kind of land on the fact that as we rebalance the masculine and the feminine polarity in ourselves, it's not about making the masculine wrong.
Definitely not.
It's about being the feminine yes, and holding the yes and holding the love, and then trusting that the masculine will rewire itself in this new vibration of freedom so that it can be its natural expression in a healthy way. And that is the feminine responsibility, is to say, you know what? I'm not going to engage in the fight. I don't need to defend myself. I'm simply going to be who I am, and I'm going to stand in that lovingly, and then wait with patience while you reorganize yourself and express yourself in the way that is the right way for you, in the most healthy way for you. As I think some people forget that kind of the assertment of the way the masculine has been in charge on the planet for the last few thousand years probably was just as harmful to the masculine as it was to
absolutely.
Of any system creates disharmony within every part of the system. So there's a wiring that's going to benefit everybody. It's not just benefit, like that's just not happening. And plus, we all have masculine and feminine in us. It's not like I'm feminine only. Like, we're all on the spectrum of, like, we all have it both. We have the Inga and the Pingala, like the equal balance of the.
Yeah. And I love that idea of, it's the bird with one wing, and that poor wing's pretty tired because it's been flying around in circles for 2,000 years. And this other wing's looking to unfurl, and we need both. And it's not for that wing to drop off. It's that idea of, like, the bird needs to start flying straight now, because when no one's benefiting from the one-winged bird. We need to have both.
True. And the feminine force is the creator. It's the creative force, right? So as we reconnect with the creator, right, then we all become creators. We all become creators of our own reality, not simply like looking up to make, to get the order from on high, which has been the old.
And I think it's the recognition that we are the creators. I think that's the thing that's coming in. It's that absolute recognition. And even if it is, this is all similar and we're creating all of it, but that seems to be the message. We are creating every moment of this at every given point. We are creation manifest. Like, that's that's what we're doing here.
So take it
all out.
What you're creating. Think. Hard work. I love it. You can put all your type A energy toward that.
Yes.
I like it.
Awesome.
Discipline.
Definitely.
All right. Well, is there anything else that needs to be spoken that didn't get covered in our conversation? Like, because as we were coming into this, I'm just putting that out there. What else wants to come forward, if there is anything?
No, I think we meandered and we hit some lovely little spots along the way. No, I feel complete.
You feel good? Okay. I believe at the beginning you were mentioning some kind of pivotal moments that were kind of coming into, like, some alignments. We might throw a few dates out astrologically just for people who have made it this far in the conversation. We're in 20 minutes in, but the North Node is changing to Aries on approximately July 18th. It's a North Node conjunction with ARIES, which is the asteroid of discord and like, the coming forward of the feminine, I don't know, warrior on September 7th. And then Chiron conjoins the North Node on February 19th, 2024. So there's a lot of healing of the warrior that's coming in the next cycle of time before Neptune moves into Aries on March 30th, 2025. And then we to kind of this redreaming of the sacred warrior, right? This rewiring of the sacred warrior that's going to take us through to 2038, 13 years. And along the way, somewhere also in 2025, Saturn will come into Aries. So there will be
the structuring maybe of all of that starts to come about, the restructuring, whatever that's going to look like, with the Pluto through Aquarius and then Saturn coming in post its stint in Pisces. It should be very interesting.
Indeed. Well, perhaps we will have more conversations along the way. It was really nice to hang out with you. So I'm gonna stop our recording. But if anybody wants to find Candice, where can people find you? Where's your web?
So I'm yet to even sort all of that, but probably Ninth House Astrology on Instagram is the best place at the moment. The plan is also to do a couple of one-on-ones with regards to using your birth chart for moving forward in a corporate career or in any career you want to be working through. So we're going to be using astrology specifically for that.
Well, when I post this on YouTube, I will put your bio information underneath it so that people can find you directly. Okay. I love it. Bye. All right.
Thank you. Bye.